She never planned to fall for him. She only planned to destroy him. The night rain drenched the city in silver streaks as Alina crouched behind the brick wall of the Moretti estate, her breath fogging in the cold air, her camera lens focused on the mansion of the most feared Mafia family in the country. She came here for one reason: revenge. Her brother had vanished after crossing their path, and Alina had sworn she would uncover the truth, even if it meant spying on a family known for making people disappear. But as lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the mansion's rooftop, her eyes caught movement. Him. The one they warned her about, the one she was told never to look in the eye, the one she was supposed to avoid at any cost. And yet, she couldn't look away. He walked with the kind of silent authority she had only heard in rumors, a tall figure in a dark coat, sharp jaw and cold eyes scanning the grounds like he sensed every secret hidden in the shadows. Adrian Moretti, the youngest son of the Mafia family, the one who rarely showed his face, the one who was said to be more dangerous than his father. Alina steadied her breath, raised her camera, and zoomed in. She had evidence to gather, she had a mission, she had a promise to keep. But the moment she clicked the shutter, the world seemed to freeze. Because he suddenly turned his head sharply, looking directly toward her hiding spot, as if he felt her watching him through the storm. Her heartbeat slammed in her chest. Did he see her? Then, in the same terrifying, mesmerizing moment, he stepped closer to the balcony edge, rain sliding across the sharp lines of his face, and spoke into his phone with a calmness that chilled the air. "Find the spy tonight." The words sliced through her resolve. She had been careful. She knew she had been careful. Yet somehow he sensed her presence, sensed the tremor in the air, sensed the threat she posed. Panic surged through Alina's veins. She slipped away from the wall, racing through the alley, her boots splashing against the puddles as she tried to vanish into the night. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Calm, steady, deliberate. Not running, not chasing, but following, and that was somehow worse. When she finally reached her apartment, shaking, drenched, and breathless, she collapsed on her bed. She reviewed the photos on her camera with trembling fingers. Surveillance images, timestamps, patterns, and then one picture that shouldn't exist. His face. Up close. Directly staring into her lens. Not angry, not surprised, but curious. Almost like he wanted her to see him. Almost like he was silently saying, "Your move." What Alina didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that just 2 hours later, Adrian Moretti stood in a dark room surrounded by screens watching her grainy silhouette sprint through the rain. He had already found her name, her job, her history, her secrets. And with a quiet, dangerous smirk, he whispered, "Let's see how long you last, little spy." She had planned to spy on the Mafia family to expose them, but she didn't realize she had just caught the attention of the wrong Moretti, the one who didn't forgive, the one who didn't forget, the one who always, always got what he wanted. And now, he wanted her. Maya didn't sleep the entire night after meeting Adrian for the first time. She replayed every moment again and again, the subtle danger in his voice, the razor-sharp awareness in his eyes, and the way he seemed to see right through her, despite her perfect act. She had handled cartel leaders, corrupt politicians, and arms traffickers before, but nothing had ever sent a chill through her bones the way Adrian Moretti had. He wasn't like the men she had been trained to deceive. He wasn't twitchy, paranoid, or impulsive. Adrian was calm, deadly calm, like a storm that knew exactly when to hit. And Maya, despite her training, felt something she wasn't prepared for, the quiet pull of fascination. That terrified her more than being caught. The next morning, Maya walked into the mansion again, blending into the staff effortlessly. The Moretti residence buzzed with silent activity, guards moving like shadows, cameras subtly embedded in every corner, Coded messages passed between men in suits. It was a different world, a world where power didn't need to speak loudly because it was already understood. Her mission supervisor had been right. Infiltrating this family was like stepping into the jaws of a sleeping lion, and the lion, she feared, had begun to wake. She began her assigned work, reorganizing the East Wing archive, a perfect place to plant listening devices without raising suspicion. The room smelled of old wood and expensive leather-bound volumes. Family photographs lined the walls, Adrian shaking hands with political leaders, Adrian with philanthropic boards, Adrian at charity events. To the world, he was a respected businessman. To underground circles, he was the invisible puppet master whose empire stretched across continents. But as Maya studied those photos, something didn't add up. His eyes, always steady, always watching, held neither cruelty nor joy. They held responsibility and something darker, something burdened. She had planted 2 microphones and a miniature transmitter when suddenly the door behind her clicked open. Her breath hitched. No one was scheduled to come here for another 20 minutes. She turned and froze. Adrian Moretti stood there, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, hair slightly tousled as if he had been running a hand through it out of irritation or impatience. His gaze drifted slowly from her hands to her face, assessing, calculating. Maya forced herself to smile, heart pounding against her ribs like a captured bird. "Good morning, sir," she said, with the calmest voice she could muster. "What are you doing in this section?" he asked, stepping inside. His tone wasn't accusing, but curious, and curiosity from a man like him was more dangerous than suspicion from anyone else. "I was asked to reorganize these files. The system is outdated," she replied smoothly. He moved closer. Too close. Close enough that she could feel the weight of his presence, the quiet, commanding energy he carried without even trying. He reached past me to a shelf, and she instinctively stiffened. His fingertips grazed the exact spot where she had planted a device. Her throat tightened. He brushed away a small speck of dust and lowered his hand. "Leave the old files," he said. "I prefer some things untouched." "Yes, sir." He nodded, lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary, studying her face as though memorizing it. Then he turned and left, but Maya didn't exhale until she could no longer hear his footsteps. As the day progressed, she heard fragments of conversations from guards passing through hallways. Something big was happening tonight. An unexpected shipment delay, a meeting with an allied family, security shifts being doubled. Maya kept her head down, listening intently while pretending not to. She needed every piece of information she could gather. That evening, while the rest of the mansion prepared for an important gathering, Maya was asked to help in the private dining hall. She moved gracefully between tables, arranging cutlery, ensuring everything was perfect. The room shimmered under golden chandeliers, heavy velvet curtains drawn to keep prying eyes from seeing the powerful men and women who would soon fill this place. As she adjusted a centerpiece, she sensed him before she saw him, the quiet, commanding presence, the heavy silence that followed him like a shadow. Adrian. He entered the dining hall alone, but his presence filled the room as though he weren't a man, but a force. He stood there for a moment, watching her with unreadable eyes. "You work quietly," he remarked, walking toward her. "It's my job, sir." Most people talk too much. His eyes held hers, and something flickered in them. "You don't." "I speak when necessary." "And when is that?" he asked softly. "When someone asks me a question." He chuckled, a short, low sound that transformed his face for a brief second. Maya felt something twist inside her chest, a warmth she immediately scolded herself for. Attraction to the target was rule number 1 of what not to do, and yet here she was, fighting her own heartbeat. He walked around the table slowly, fingertips brushing the carved wooden edges. "Do you like working here?" he asked. "It's different," I answered honestly. "Different good or different dangerous?" Her breath faltered. He smirked. "Relax, it's just a question."
Before she could answer, Lorenzo Moetti, his right-hand man, entered abruptly. "Boss, the meeting is starting." He nodded. "Keep the hall ready," he told her, before leaving. But his gaze lingered, just long enough to unsettle her entire world. The meeting behind closed doors lasted hours. Maya, stationed outside under the pretense of assisting with refreshments, managed to overhear voices. Tense, low, urgent. Keywords slipped through. Shipment intercepted. Rival family. Internal leak. Find who it is. Her stomach clenched. They were searching for a spy, and she was standing in the heart of the danger. By midnight, the mansion had gone silent, except for guards roaming in tight patterns. Maya carefully slipped into the west corridor, planning to retrieve the audio device she had planted earlier. Her steps were soft, calculated. She moved like a shadow until she heard footsteps. Not loud, not rushed. Measured, intentional. She ducked behind a statue, breath trapped in her throat. A figure appeared, tall, broad shoulders, unmistakable silhouette.
Adrian. But he wasn't alone. Another man followed behind him, a scarred lieutenant. "She's new," the lieutenant said quietly. "You notice her?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. "Yes," he finally said, voice controlled. "I notice everything." "And?" "She's clean," Adrian said. Maya nearly sighed with relief until he added, "For now." Her blood froze. "She's hiding something," Adrian continued. "I don't know what yet, but people who move that quietly always have secrets." The lieutenant nodded. "Should I dig into her background?" "No," Adrian said sharply. "I'll handle it myself." Maya's heart pounded so loudly she feared they might hear it. She remained still until their footsteps faded into the distance. She couldn't afford another slip. She needed to finish the mission before he discovered the truth. The next day brought unexpected rain, heavy, relentless. The storm seemed to swallow the sky, thunder shaking the mansion windows. Maya was in the main hall, reviewing housekeeping lists, when she felt eyes on her again. Adrian stood near the staircase, hands in his pockets, watching her with a quiet intensity that made her pulse stutter. "You're early today," he said, walking toward her. "I start early." He nodded, but his gaze didn't soften. It sharpened. "Walk with me." Her stomach dropped. She didn't have the option to refuse. He led her through the mansion silently, turning down hallways she had never seen before. Finally, they reached a private indoor garden, an oasis hidden behind glass walls, filled with rare plants and the soft gurgle of a marble fountain. He stopped and faced her. "Tell me something, and tell me the truth." Maya forced herself to meet his eyes. "What do you want to know? Why does a girl with your posture, your reflexes, your awareness, choose to work as a maid?" Her pulse spiked violently. He was observant, dangerously so. She took a slow breath. "My life wasn't easy. I learned to adapt." "That's not an answer," he said. "It's the only one I have." He stepped closer, too close, his voice lowering to something that slid under her skin. "I don't like lies." "I'm not lying." He studied her for a long time, his gaze sharp enough to cut through any disguise she wore. Finally, he murmured, "You're interesting." She swallowed hard. "I'm not." "You are. And that's the problem." Before she could respond, a guard rushed in. "Boss, urgent. There's movement from the Viscari family." Adrian's expression hardened instantly. "Stay here," he told her, voice suddenly sharp with authority. He left. And in that moment, Maya realized something chilling. Adrian Moretti didn't suspect her because she acted suspicious.
He suspected her because he noticed her, because she stood out, because something about her drew him in. And that terrifying pull, would be her biggest danger. Hours later, the mansion echoed with chaos. Guards moved quickly, vehicles roared outside. Tension crackled through the air like electricity before a storm. Maya was in the main hall, trying to gather intel, her nerves taut like stretched wire. That's when she heard it. Maya. She turned. Adrian strode toward her, face fierce, eyes lit with something between fury and concern. "You shouldn't be here," he growled. I was just..." He grabbed her wrist, firm, warm, unyielding. "You listen to me," he said, voice low and commanding. "Someone attacked our shipment tonight. They're targeting this house next." Her breath stopped. "Why do you care?" He paused. Then he said quietly, too quietly, "Because I don't want anything happening to you." Maya felt the world tilt. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to get close. He wasn't supposed to feel anything. But the look in his eyes, raw, unguarded, dangerous, told her the truth. Adrian Moretti, the man she was spying on, was beginning to fall for her. And that terrifying pull would be her mission could not survive.
The morning after the attack, the mansion felt strangely quiet, almost deceptive in its calm. Maya moved through the hallways, alert to every creak of the polished floors, every whisper of the wind against the tall windows, aware that in this house, silence often preceded chaos. Adrian's presence was palpable even when he wasn't there, a shadow in every corner, a weight in every glance from the guards, a warning in every perfectly timed security measure. Maya couldn't help but feel exposed under this scrutiny, yet at the same time, she realized that he had no proof against her, no reason to suspect the true purpose of her presence. And somehow, that made the tension even more electrifying. Every interaction was a calculated dance, and every word carried a double meaning. She was an intruder in his world, but one he was curiously letting linger at the edges of his empire. That afternoon, as she worked in the garden corridor, Adrian appeared again. His eyes scanned her with that familiar intensity, a mix of curiosity and caution, and Maya felt the shiver of both fear and fascination. "You move too confidently for someone who should be nervous," he said softly, stepping closer, his voice low but sharp enough to demand attention. Maya straightened, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I know my way around," she replied, careful not to give away more than necessary. He smirked faintly, a dangerous half-smile that hinted at amusement, authority, and almost an imperceptible warmth that she couldn't decipher. "Confidence is admirable, but arrogance can be deadly. Be careful which side you choose tonight." The evening brought another wave of unease. Maya had positioned herself to observe the servants' hall, hoping to catch snippets of information that might explain the shipment attack. But she wasn't prepared for the chilling realization that someone else was watching her. From the shadows, she noticed the faintest reflection of a man's silhouette in the polished wood panels, a figure she didn't recognize. She ducked instinctively behind a large potted plant, heart racing. Her instinct screamed danger. But the figure moved closer, deliberate, and she prepared herself to act. At the last moment, Adrian appeared from another angle, intercepting the stranger with fluid authority. His presence alone was enough to make the intruder hesitate, retreating into the darkness without another word. Maya exhaled sharply, simultaneously relieved and unnervingly aware that Adrian had been watching her, protecting her, and evaluating her in the same moment. The incident left her shaken, but it also revealed a layer of complexity she hadn't anticipated. Adrian wasn't just a Mafia heir, he was a protector of his domain, and she was now an unwilling participant in both the power and danger that enveloped it. And yet, despite every rational warning, Maya found herself drawn to him, to the way he commanded presence without effort, to the quiet confidence that masked lethal capability, to the rare glimpses of vulnerability he allowed only in her presence. She hated that she was fascinated, hated that her heart raced every time he appeared unexpectedly, hated the magnetic pull she could not resist. Later that night, she overheard a conversation in the library between Adrian and his lieutenant. Their voices were low but urgent, discussing rival families, missing shipments, and the potential leak that had compromised their plans. Maya's pulse quickened. She had gathered evidence for months, but now she realized that her presence in the mansion was no longer just about spying. It was about survival. Every move she made could expose her, and every slip could be fatal. Yet the same danger carried an intoxicating thrill. She found herself strategizing not only to complete her mission, but to navigate the unpredictable currents of Adrian's scrutiny. The tension escalated further the next morning when she was called to assist Adrian directly. He asked her to oversee a delivery inspection in the East Wing, a task that placed her directly in the midst of both the operation and his gaze. The air between them was taut with unspoken words. Every glance carried meaning, every instruction hinted at testing her abilities, and every proximity made her acutely aware of his control over the environment. She realized with a sinking mix of dread and anticipation that she was no longer merely an observer. She was entwined in his world, in his plans, and in the invisible web of trust and power that only he could define. Throughout the day, Maya noticed small gestures that both unnerved her and captivated her. He would appear just at the right moment to correct a minor error, to observe her reaction, or to assess her composure under pressure. She caught the briefest of smiles, almost imperceptible, almost teasing, and her breath would hitch. She recognized that he was drawing her in, testing her limits, and perhaps probing for the truth he already suspected. And she, despite herself, began to respond in kind, carefully measuring her expressions, her words, and her movements to maintain both her cover and her growing curiosity. That evening, after the mansion had settled into a tense quiet, Adrian found her alone in the corridor overlooking the courtyard. Rain had begun to patter softly against the glass walls, and the dim light cast long shadows across the marble floor. "You're curious," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Maya's pulse skipped a beat. "I observe," she corrected, knowing that he would sense the nuance. He stepped closer, so that the space between them was charged with energy neither could ignore. Observing is different than knowing, and knowing is dangerous. His gaze held hers with an intensity that made it impossible to hide neither fear or fascination. Maya swallowed hard, aware that the game she had begun had shifted in ways she could neither control nor predict. The night deepened, bringing with it both stillness and the subtle hum of tension. Guards patrolled as usual, the mansion's intricate security system hummed quietly in the background, and yet Maya could feel the invisible threads of attention connecting her to Adrian in a way that transcended ordinary observation. Every step she took, every breath she drew, seemed to be noted, evaluated, and catalogued. And in the midst of this, an unexpected thought struck her. She had never felt more alive. Fear and attraction, danger and fascination, secrecy and desire, all intertwined in a way that left her both exhilarated and terrified. By the end of Part 3, Maya understood fully that her mission was no longer simply about uncovering secrets or gathering evidence. She had become part of a dangerous, intricate world where power, trust, and emotional tension intersected with deadly precision. Adrian Moretti was no longer a target. He was a force she could neither evade nor resist, a man whose influence reached into every corner of her life, whose presence commanded attention, and whose growing intrigue had begun to unsettle the careful boundaries she had built. She realized, with reluctant acknowledgement, that the story she had set out to write had taken a turn, one that would test her resolve, challenge her instincts, and ignite a connection she had never anticipated.
The mansion was quiet, but alive with tension, every corner vibrating with unseen energy. Maya moved carefully through the hallways, aware that even the smallest misstep could alert Adrian or the guards to her true intentions. Her mission had become more complicated than ever. She was no longer simply spying on the Moretti family. She was navigating a labyrinth of observation, suspicion, and unspoken emotional undercurrents. Each encounter with Adrian was a test she hadn't anticipated. His gaze lingering too long, his voice carrying a mixture of authority and curiosity that made her pulse race and her mind spin with possibilities she had not allowed herself to consider. She found herself constantly measuring her reactions, trying to maintain her cover while simultaneously being drawn to the dangerous intensity that seemed to define him. That afternoon, A subtle incident threw her carefully constructed balance into chaos. As she was inspecting a series of documents in the library, she overheard a conversation between Adrian and his second-in-command. They were discussing a rival family's movements, a shipment that had gone missing, and whispers of betrayal within their own ranks. Her stomach clenched. She realized that the Morettis were operating on a level of strategic precision that left no room for error, and she, despite all her training, had become a potential liability. But as she absorbed the gravity of the situation, she sensed movement behind her. Adrian appeared silently, his presence almost imperceptible until he was directly beside her, his eyes scanning the documents with an analytical intensity that made her breath catch. "You're thorough," he said quietly, his voice carrying both appreciation and a subtle warning. Maya stiffened, aware that every word she spoke, every action she took, was being catalogued by a man whose perception was razor-sharp and unyielding. The following days became a maze of calculated moves, stolen glances, and heartbeats that threatened to betray her every thought. Maya felt herself pulled in two directions: the mission she had trained for her entire life, and the undeniable draw toward Adrian, whose presence was becoming an unrelenting force she could neither ignore nor evade. Every encounter with him sent electricity racing through her veins, yet every smile, every soft word, every barely there touch carried danger. She was learning with a chilling clarity that in Adrian Moretti's world, attraction was not weakness, it was leverage, and she was at risk of giving him both without even knowing it. The tension reached its peak one late evening. The mansion was quiet, the air heavy with anticipation as a storm rumbled in the distance. Maya had been tasked with overseeing the main hall while Adrian conducted a secret meeting regarding a rival family's movements. She moved with deliberate precision, ensuring that every light, every curtain, and every security measure was in place. But as she adjusted a chair, she caught movement from the corner of her eye, a shadow slipping along the far wall. Instinctively, she ducked behind a large ornamental column, heart hammering in her chest. Her mind raced. Had the rival family sent someone inside? Or worse, had her presence been discovered? Before she could act, Adrian appeared. He had been silent, watching, waiting. "You're too close to danger," he said, his voice low, measured, yet threaded with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Maya tried to steady her voice. I'm aware of my surroundings," she replied, forcing calm into her tone. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers, and the faintest smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Awareness isn't enough," he said. "You're reckless, yet you think you're cautious. That contradiction will either save you or destroy you." The words hung between them, sharp and precise, and she realized that he had already assessed her capabilities, her limits, and her vulnerabilities, all with one glance. Later, as the storm poured rain over the mansion, Adrian escorted her to the study, insisting she review surveillance footage with him. They sat side by side in the dim glow of the monitors, shoulders nearly touching, breaths synchronized in the tense quiet. He showed her footage of the rival family attempting to probe the estate's perimeter, explaining vulnerabilities, countermeasures, and strategic responses with a precision that left her simultaneously impressed and unnerved. Yet as she followed his instructions, she felt the pull of his presence in ways she couldn't control. Every time his hand brushed hers while pointing to the screens, her breath caught. Every time his eyes lingered longer than necessary, her heart skipped a beat. She hated herself for noticing, hated the way her body reacted, and hated that the careful shield she had maintained around her emotions was eroding. The emotional intensity came to a head that night when Adrian unexpectedly called her to the private garden, the storm now a distant whisper beyond the walls. "You need to understand something," he said, voice low but unyielding. "You are not just under observation. You are part of a game that can kill or protect, that can bind or destroy. And you, Maya, are at the center of it, whether you like it or not." His words cut through her like a blade. She swallowed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I know how to survive. she said, her voice steady, but trembling beneath the weight of truth and unspoken desire. "And what about you?" he asked, softly. "Do you know how to protect someone who isn't yours to protect?" She hesitated, suddenly aware of the impossibility of her mission's line between survival and emotional surrender. Adrian stepped closer, the soft glow of the lanterns illuminating the sharp angles of his face. "I protect what I care about," he murmured, almost more to himself than to her. Maya's breath caught. That simple admission, so rare, so unguarded, struck at the core of her resolve. She had trained for danger, deception, and betrayal, yet no lesson had prepared her for the lure of a man whose very existence commanded attention, desire, and fear simultaneously. In that charged silence, time seemed to halt. Rain pattered softly on the glass roof above, the world outside fading into irrelevance as the tension between them thickened into something dangerous, undeniable, and profoundly intimate. The next few hours blurred into a mixture of strategy, observation, and close-quarters training. Adrian tested her in subtle ways, a question phrased to reveal knowledge, a task designed to expose reaction, a simple glance that challenged composure. Yet each test, each interaction, each charged silence drew them closer, creating a web of unspoken understanding, a fragile bridge of trust and tension that neither dared cross completely. She realized that her mission, her careful preparation, was being compromised not by exposure, but by the subtle magnetism of his attention. Every instinct she had relied upon was at war with the undeniable chemistry simmering beneath the surface. By the early hours of the morning, Maya had retreated to her quarters, drenched in exhaustion and conflicted emotions. She replayed the day's encounters, the carefully measured words, the calculated movements, and the moments when Adrian's gaze had lingered too long. She recognized that the attraction was mutual, unspoken, unacknowledged, but present, and that realization terrified her. She had entered this world to observe, to gather intelligence, to maintain detachment, yet now she was emotionally entangled, drawn to a man whose power, influence, and danger dwarfed everything she had ever known. A sudden knock at the door broke her reverie. Before she could respond, Adrian appeared, dripping from the storm outside. His expression was unreadable, eyes dark, calculating, yet something softer flickered under the surface. "You couldn't leave me to think alone," he said simply. Maya's heart raced. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trebling. "Neither should you," he replied, stepping closer, his presence enveloping her like a force she could not resist. In that charged silence, words became unnecessary. Their mutual understanding, the electric tension, the subtle acknowledgement of attraction and danger spoke louder than any declaration. And yet, as he turned to leave, Adrian paused. "Remember this," he said, softly, but with unshakable authority. "In this world, mistakes are punished, curiosity can kill. But I am watching, always." With that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Maya trembling, aware that the lines between her mission and her emotions had blurred irrevocably. She was no longer a mere observer. She was now a participant in a dangerous game of trust, attraction, and survival. And the consequences of misstep were more lethal than anything she had imagined.